I used to think loyalty mattered. I used to believe that hard work, honesty, and showing up for people was enough to make them see your worth. But I was wrong. In the corporate world, loyalty means nothing when power is involved. My name's Ryan, and this is the story of how I got fired for being late once, and ended up becoming the CEO of the same company that kicked me out. It all started on a rainy Monday morning, the kind of morning where everything goes wrong at once. My alarm didn't go off. My phone died overnight. The traffic was insane. I had a major presentation scheduled for 9 a.m., and I was running behind for the first time in 2 years. I'd been at Bright Edge Technologies for 5 years. I'd worked my way up from an intern to a senior project manager. I was the guy who stayed late, who fixed everyone else's mistakes, who made the company money without ever asking for extra credit. But that day fate decided to test me. When I finally reached the office, soaked, breathless, and 10 minutes late, my boss, Mr. Richard Hale, was standing at the entrance. His arms were crossed, his expression cold as stone. Richard was the kind of man who thrived on control. Sharp suits, sharper words, and an ego so big it needed its own office. "Late, Ryan?" he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "I guess punctuality isn't your strength anymore." "I'm sorry, sir. My car broke down and he didn't let me finish." "Excuses. You had one job, be on time. You think the board cares about your excuses?" Everyone in the lobby went silent. I could feel their eyes on me, the guy who gave his all being humiliated for being 10 minutes late. "Richard, please, I've never—" "You're done," he snapped. "Pack your things just like that." 5 years erased in 30 seconds. I remember standing there, my mind spinning. Fired. For being late once. No warning. No conversation. Just humiliation. I tried to fight back. HR wouldn't listen. "Policy violation," they said. Richard had already signed the papers. When I walked out that day, it was raining harder than before. My ID badge was still swinging from my hand. I looked up at the tall glass building, Bright Edge, the place where I'd given my best years. That day, something inside me broke, and something new began to burn. For a few weeks, I was lost. My savings started to dry up. I applied to dozens of jobs, but word had spread fast. Richard had blacklisted me. Apparently, he told everyone in his network that I was unreliable and unprofessional. I went from respected manager to corporate ghost overnight. But here's the thing. About hitting rock bottom, you learn who you really are. I wasn't meant to stay down. One night, while scrolling through LinkedIn, I saw something interesting. Bright Edge was looking for investors. Their new product line wasn't doing well. They were bleeding money. That's when a thought hit me. Maybe this was my chance. I'd always had a plan in the back of my mind. While working there, I'd kept a private version of an AI-driven project management system, something I'd developed quietly, using my own code. The system could streamline workflows and save companies millions. I'd pitched it to Richard once and he'd laughed. "Stick to your spreadsheets, Ryan," he said. But now I realized that project was my weapon. I spent the next 6 months building a small startup called Vinex Systems. It was just me, my laptop, and pure desperation. I refined my code, tested it, built demos, and started pitching it to investors. Most ignored me, until one day I got a message from an angel investor named Daniel Carter. He'd been watching my posts about corporate efficiency tools and wanted a meeting. Daniel was older, calm, and sharp. He listened to my entire pitch quietly, then smiled. "So you're telling me this system can cut operational costs by 30%? "Yes, sir, easily." He leaned back, thoughtful. "Ryan, I like you. You remind me of myself when I started. I'll invest $1 million, but I want 20% equity." I could barely breathe. That money changed everything. Overnight, Vinex became real. I hired a small team, rented an office, and began signing small contracts. Within a year, our software was being used by 5 companies, including one that used to compete with Bright Edge. Meanwhile, Bright Edge was crumbling. I'd see headlines about their failed launches and internal resignations. Richard was still CEO, but his empire was cracking. I knew it was only a matter of time. Then one afternoon, something wild happened. I got an email from Bright Edge. It was from their procurement department. They wanted to schedule a meeting with Vinex Systems for a potential software partnership. They didn't know who was behind it yet. I almost laughed out loud. The same company that fired me was now trying to buy my product. I agreed to the meeting. The next week I walked into the same glass building, the same lobby where Richard had humiliated me. But this time I wasn't an employee. I was the founder and CEO of a company they needed. When I entered the conference room, Richard was there. He didn't recognize me at first. I had changed, sharper suit, calmer eyes, confidence built from pain. "Mr. Hale," I said, extending my hand. He froze. "Ryan?" "Long time no see," I said with a polite smile. "I believe we're here to discuss a potential partnership." The room went silent. His face turned pale. "You're the CEO of Vinex?" "Correct." "The same unreliable guy you fired for being 10 minutes late?" I could see the shame flicker in his eyes, but he quickly masked it. Let's talk business." We went through the presentation. My software could fix everything that was currently destroying Bright Edge. The irony wasn't lost on me. At the end of the meeting, Richard sighed. "Ryan, this could save us. Name your price." I looked at him for a long moment. "I'll sell you the full license for $25 million. But there's one condition," he frowned. "Condition? I want full control of product integration. That means direct oversight from me, as acting chief operating officer." He looked stunned. "You want to work here again?" I smiled faintly. "No, I want to run it right this time." He hesitated, but he had no choice. The board was desperate, and my system was their last hope. 3 months later, Bright Edge integrated Vinec, and profits skyrocketed. The board was thrilled. Richard tried to take credit, of course. But the investors saw the truth. I was the one driving the comeback. During a board meeting, one of the major shareholders, a woman named Catherine, asked a simple question. "Why isn't Ryan running this company?" Everyone went silent. Within weeks, a vote was held. The decision was unanimous. Richard was removed as CEO due to poor performance and mismanagement. I was appointed as the new chief executive officer of Bright Edge Technologies, the same company that once threw me out like trash. When I walked into the CEO's office for the first time. I paused by the window. The same view Richard used to boast about. I thought about the rainy day he fired me, how powerless I had felt. Now the power was mine. A few days later, Richard requested a private meeting. He looked tired, defeated, a shadow of his former self. "Ryan," he said softly, I made a mistake." "You didn't deserve what happened," I leaned back, calm. "You're right. But it was necessary. If you hadn't fired me, I'd still be working for you." He nodded slowly. "So what happens to me now?" I looked him dead in the eye. "You'll be compensated fairly. But this company needs a new direction, one built on respect, not fear." He sighed and left the room quietly. That was the last time I saw him. Under my leadership, Bright Edge grew faster than ever. We rebranded, expanded globally, and implemented policies that valued employees. Flexible hours, mental health programs, transparent leadership. I made sure no one ever felt what I once felt. Disposable. A year later, during our annual conference, I stood on stage in front of thousands of employees. The same stage Richard used to dominate with arrogance. "When I first joined this company," I began, "I believed hard work would always be enough. But one day I learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to truly rise. This company will never again reward cruelty or punish loyalty. From now on, we rise together." The applause was thunderous. I saw people crying, smiling, feeling proud to be part of something real. After the event, I sat alone in my office, looking at the city lights. The journey replayed in my mind, the rain, the firing, the humiliation, the hunger, the revenge. But now it didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like justice. I didn't just take back what was mine, I rebuilt it better. And sometimes, when new employees ask me about the company's story, I smile and say, "Let's just say our former CEO taught me everything I shouldn't be." They laugh, not knowing that the man who once fired me would probably never set foot in a boardroom again. But deep down, I'm grateful. Because without that pain, I'd never have become who I am. Life has a strange way of testing you, but if you play your cards right, every loss becomes your foundation. So yes, I was fired for being late once, but in the end, I became the boss of the man who fired me. And let me tell you something. Success doesn't need revenge. Success is the revenge. This continuation deepens the emotional and power arcs, showing how success tests Ryan's morality, his ex-boss's downfall, and the unexpected twist that takes the revenge story beyond ego into legacy. No headings, just a natural cinematic flow that hooks viewers till the end. People often think the story ends when you win. They see the revenge, the glory, the comebacks, and they think that's the finish line. But they don't tell you what happens after you win. They don't tell you that success comes with its own ghosts. After becoming CEO, my life changed fast. Reporters wanted interviews. Old coworkers suddenly remembered my name. People who'd ignored me were now calling me sir. For the first time in years, I had the power I'd once dreamed about. And I'll admit, it felt good. Maybe too good. At first, I poured everything into rebuilding the company. I worked 16-hour days, visited every department, and asked employees one simple question: what's broken? They told me stories that reminded me of myself: burnout, fear, exhaustion. I made it my mission to change that. I cut unnecessary meetings, introduced hybrid work, started mentorship programs. Slowly, the culture shifted, but success has a strange way of attracting shadows. A few months after the transformation, I started noticing odd things. Some contracts weren't adding up. Expenses were being approved without my signature. One night, while reviewing files, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A secret offshore account linked to BrightEdge's old operations. The transactions went back years. To Richard's tenure, it looked like embezzlement. Millions had quietly disappeared under the radar. I called an emergency meeting with our CFO and legal team. The more we dug, the worse it got. Richard had siphoned off company funds, using shell accounts and fake consulting contracts. The man who once called me unreliable had been stealing from the company the entire time. The board wanted to bury it. They were afraid of scandal. But I couldn't let it go. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, for everyone who'd suffered under him. So I went public. We released a statement confirming a financial investigation into past leadership. The media went wild. Richard's name was everywhere. Former BrightEdge CEO under investigation for corporate fraud. He called me that night. His voice trembled for the first time. "Ryan, please. You don't understand. They'll destroy me." I was silent for a long moment. "You destroyed yourself the day you put your ego before your people." He begged me to stop, said he'd pay it back, said he had a family. And for a second I almost softened. But then I remembered standing in that lobby years ago, drenched and humiliated as he told me I was done. "No one deserves to be above accountability," I said quietly. "Not even you." The next morning he was arrested. News spread like wildfire. Employees whispered about it in the halls. The man who'd fired me was now facing prison. But I didn't celebrate. There was no satisfaction in seeing him broken. Revenge had felt sweet in theory, but in reality it was hollow. I didn't feel victorious, I felt heavy. That night I couldn't sleep. I drove back to the office, parked across the street, and just sat there looking at the BrightEdge logo, shining against the night sky. I thought about the kid I used to be, scared, hopeful, desperate to prove himself. I realized something important then. Revenge had gotten me here, but purpose had to keep me here. The next morning I called a meeting with my executive team. "From today," I said, "we stop looking backward. This company won't be built on revenge or pride. It'll be built on people." I launched a new initiative and we called it the RISE program. It was designed to give second chances to professionals who'd been unfairly fired, blacklisted, or overlooked. We offered them training, mentorship, and jobs. For me, it was personal. I wanted to create a place where no one would ever feel worthless for a single mistake, like I once did. One of the first hires under the program was a young man named Leo. He reminded me of myself. Brilliant, passionate, but nervous. He'd been fired from his last job for missing a deadline after staying up for 3 days straight, trying to fix his manager's mess. I saw the same pain in his eyes that I once had. I took him under my wing, and over time I watched him grow into one of our top engineers. A few months later, he walked into my office holding a prototype. "Sir, I think I can improve the core of our AI system," he said shyly. I smiled. "Show me." He did, and it was incredible. His version was faster, smarter, more intuitive. It could redefine our technology. I decided to give him full credit for it publicly. Watching him stand on stage, nervous but glowing as the crowd applauded his innovation, that was the real victory. BrightEdge's success skyrocketed. Investors called it a miracle turnaround. But what they didn't see was that it wasn't my miracle. It was the collective result of every employee who'd once been overlooked. Still, even as everything thrived, there was one part of my story left unresolved. A few months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name written in shaky handwriting. Inside there was a short note. "Ryan, I'm sorry. You were right. I forgot what leadership meant. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. Richard." I stared at that note for a long time. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. I never saw Richard again. Last I heard, he'd moved away, living quietly somewhere upstate. Maybe he was trying to start over. Maybe he finally understood. Years passed. Bright Edge became one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country. We went public, and when the stock price tripled, the entire team celebrated together. But when people toasted my name, I always thought of the younger version of myself, the one who stood in the rain, wondering if his life was over. One night after the IPO celebration, I took a drive back to the old office I'd first worked in, the small cubicle where everything began. The building was gone now, replaced by a parking lot. I parked, stepped out, and stood in the spot where I once dreamed of success. And it hit me. The real revenge was not in becoming the CEO. It was in becoming the kind of leader I needed back then, the kind who listens, the kind who believes, the kind who never forgets what it feels like to be powerless. Because the truth is, when you climb the ladder, it's easy to forget the ground you came from. But if you forget that, you become the same monster you once escaped. That realization changed everything about how I led. I stopped trying to prove anything to anyone. I started focusing on building others up. Every promotion, every raise, every decision, I made sure it carried meaning. We began sponsoring scholarships for students in underprivileged areas who wanted to study tech. We opened internship programs for young talent who couldn't afford college. And slowly, Bright Edge became more than a company. It became a movement. Years later, during a leadership conference, a reporter asked me a question that made me pause. "Ryan," she said, "your story is famous. You were fired, then became the CEO. Do you think that firing was the best or worst thing that ever happened to you?" I smiled. "Both," I said. "It broke me enough to rebuild me better." After the interview, as I walked off stage, I felt that same quiet rain starting outside, like the universe reminding me of where it all began. That night, I stood by my window again, watching the rain trace lines down the glass. Somewhere out there, I imagined Richard doing the same. Two men connected by one choice that changed both our lives. And I realized something profound. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's closure. So I whispered into the night, "I forgive you, Richard." The next morning, I woke up lighter than I'd felt in years. From that day on, I stopped running from my past and started honoring it. Every employee who joined us heard the story on their first day, not to glorify me, but to remind them that failure is not the end. It's often the beginning. One of our slogans even came from it. Be late once, rise forever. It became a company mantra, a quiet rebellion against perfectionism, a tribute to second chances. Now, years later, when I walk through the Bright Edge headquarters, glass walls gleaming, people laughing, ideas buzzing, I sometimes pause by the lobby. It's the same spot where I was once fired, but now it's filled with energy and warmth. And every so often I catch sight of someone running in, a little out of breath, maybe late by a few minutes. I smile when I see it, because I know they'll never be fired for it. Instead, someone will hand them a coffee and say, "You okay? Take a breath." That's what leadership is, and not control, not fear, but understanding. My journey began with rain, humiliation, and anger. It ended with compassion, forgiveness, and a legacy. I used to think my boss firing me was the worst day of my life. Now I know it was the day my life truly began. Because the truth is simple. When life fires you for being late, sometimes it's just giving you time to arrive exactly when you're meant to. And that's how the man who was once dismissed for being 10 minutes late, became the CEO who changed everything, not out of revenge, out of purpose, because power fades, but impact lasts forever.